Hey guys, what's up and how we doing? My name is Raz and welcome to Sound Design Saturday, episode 7. So this is actually a re-upload because the previous video just had a lot of issues that I wanted to fix. So anyway, today we will be making our own EDM tonal bass kicks in the likes of Ummet Ozcan's bass kicks. Yeah, you get the idea. So I suggest starting a new project by going up here, selecting New from Template, Minimal, and clicking on Empty. So this will make you start with an empty project, so you basically have nothing to start with. And I'm also going to change the tempo. If you're like a hardstyle guy, you can select 150, which is pretty fast. But since we're doing some mainstream shit here, I'm just going to turn this down into the usual, which is 128 BPM. So we're going to be needing 3 things, or maybe 4, or more than that. It depends on how you would like to make your own kicks. So first would be a good kick sample, so you can layer kicks if you don't have decent samples, but it's actually best if you can find one. Second will be a synth for our sub, and third would be another synth for our mid bass. So I'm going to select a kick sample that I believe is beautifully crafted. I know most of you would agree with me. So I'm going to load up the Jamu kick by Cashmere. I'm also routing that to mixer 1, which already is. It says it's in the key of D, but I don't care. We'll be making a loop in G minor because it's like very common. So first you would like to do is go to the envelope instrument settings, click on that, and we will be turning down every knob here except for the decay. Instead, crank that up to the maximum. Next, I'm going to add in 3XOSC, which is a very easy and basic plugin. I'm going to route that to mixer channel number 2. And for this, I'm going to turn oscillator 1's pitch down to the lowest. Select this sine wave and turn off oscillator 2 and oscillator 3. Next, let's add in another instance of 3XOSC, or it could be another synth of your choice, but I promise we'll be using native and stock plugins. So I'm going to route that to mixer channel number 3. I'm going to select the sawtooth wave for oscillator 1. I'm also going to pitch that down to the lowest. Select the square wave for oscillator 2. Pitch that down to the lowest as well and set the volume to 50%. I'm going to pick the noise for oscillator 3 and turn the volume down to 3%. Okay, so we can now close these windows. So let's create a loop. So I'm going to my sub and I'm going to make a simple pattern in G minor. Okay, so this is what I came up with. Alright, so I'm going to zoom in real close. I'm going to highlight every note and I'm going to move that around 2 ticks to the left, so there's enough space in between the notes. I'm also going to tweak with the envelope settings for this channel and do the same that we did for our kick, except we will be turning the release a tad bit up. I'm also going to do the same with the third synth. So I'm going to transpose this down to G3. I'm also going to copy this by highlighting, pressing Ctrl C, highlight the third synth and press Ctrl V. For our main kick, it would be pretty easy. Just right click on that and select Fill each 4 steps. Now we'd like to open the piano roll for it and zoom in real close. And drag this to the right until you get a quarter beat measure. Okay, now we can proceed to treating our samples. So let's go to our mixer channel 1, which we have our main kick currently routed to it. I'm also going to solo this. Turn this down. Around minus 15 dBs is a good starting point. Now let's proceed to mixer channel 2. So we will be loading up a wave shaper. We'll be using this to add some grit. So just simply drag the tension up 10%. We can close that. I'm also going to monitor the volume and make sure it's peaking at the same target. Now let's slap in an instance of Fruity Love filter. Drag the cutoff knob all the way up. Go to volume, pattern, and drag the first point down. Next, let's add in another point and drag that down to a 1 beat measure. Let's add in a third point. And this time we'll drag it here, just where the first column ends and the second one starts. Right click on the first point, select loop start. Right click on the second one, or our third one in this case, and select sustain loop end. Drag the first tension down at least 30%, and drag the second tension up around 10%. So we're doing manual sidechaining here. Lastly, click on this button to turn this on. Now we can proceed to our mixer channel 3. I'm also going to solo this channel. And first you would like to do is add in another fruity wave shaper in there. We'll be giving it some grit, so add a point here and drag this up 10%. We can close that. We're going to add in the fruity reverb too. So it might sound silly, but we will be using this reverb to add some kind of a metallic sound. So firstly, turn up the high cut knob to 15,000 Hertz. The low cut to 120 or 30. Doesn't have to be exact. The pre-delay to 20 milliseconds. The size down to 25. We'll be leaving the diffusion, the bass, and the crossover knobs by default. Turn the decay down to 0.3 seconds. We will be leaving the high damp, the dry, the early reflections, wet, and the stereo separation knob by default. Okay, now let's add in Fruity Parametric EQ 2. I suggest starting with a blank patch like this. It's always better to start with the least bands possible to save up CPU. Enable one band and change that to a high pass. It should look like this. Set the band to its default value by holding Alt and clicking on it. And we'll also change the order to Steep 4. Now let's drag this up to around 80 Hertz, because we'll be leaving all the space at the bottom for our kick and our bass. And next is we'll be using some bell EQs to get rid of a couple of offending frequencies. So before we get into that, I will be adjusting its volume first. Okay, now let's proceed. So the first target is around 250 to 300 Hertz area. So I'm going to drag this up and use this to sweep around and scan. Alright, that's just nasty. Next is around the 500 Hertz area, so I'm going to add another band and do the same procedure. Okay, gotcha. Next step, enable one band and change that to a low pass. Again, reset its bandwidth to default value. Now let's turn down the frequency to 5000 Hertz. Let's go back to our playlist and paste our pattern there. Make the selection 1 beat long. Go back to our EQ. And let's create an automation clip for our band 7. Now let's turn this down to 600 Hz. So right click on that and select copy value. Let's add in a fruity love filter. So first is turn the cutoff knob all the way up. Drag the first point down. Add another point. Set that to 1 beat. Add in a third point, but this time this goes in the middle of the second column. Drag the first tension down 15% and the other one up 30%. Set the first point to be our loop start and the last point to be our loop end. Finally, let's turn this on to activate it. Now time for some final volume adjustments. Okay, I'm pretty contented with that. So I'll go back to the playlist, right click on the second point of the automation and select paste value. I'm also going to turn the tension up 10%. Make sure you are in your paintbrush tool and drag this throughout the entire span of our pattern. Finally, go to select and choose deselect. Let's go to our master channel. Since we have a reverb plugin on one of the channels here, it might cause some phasing issues, so we can solve that by slapping in Maximus. First is to turn down the low band to 120 Hz. Go to the low band tab and set the stereo separation knob all the way to the right. Next is let's add in a fruity parametric EQ in there. But this time I'm going to load up a mastering preset, which is 30 Hz to 18K cut. I'm going to change it from 18K to 16K. Next is add in a fruity limiter in there. Go to the compressor tab. Set the ratio to 4:1. Set the attack up 10 milliseconds. And the release to around 300 milliseconds. Now our aim here is to get at least 3 dBs of gain reduction. So I'm just going to adjust the threshold knob here. Alright, so we're getting around 3.4. We can now close this and let's add in another instance of the fruity limiter. So turn the attack to 10 milliseconds and the limiter release to 0. Let's set the curves to 1. Now our aim here is to turn the ceiling knob down until it barely touches the top of our waveform. This will get rid of all the nasty transients that might be punching through. Now close that. Now let's add in Fruity Center and just keep it at on. So this will make sure our waveform is centered so we can get the most out of it when you normalize it later. Now before we proceed into rendering, I'm going to double check and make sure that everything has gone to planned. I love it. Let's proceed to rendering. Go up here and select File, Export, Wave. I'm going to save it into a folder I made earlier. Make sure you have the exact same settings as I do. Full song, leave remainder, wave format, 24-bit, 512-point sync resampling quality, turn on HQ for all plugins, and turn on Train PDC delay. I won't be needing the other functions, so I won't be using them. Make sure you're not dithering. You don't want to use that for now. Now the last step would be importing it into a program called Audacity. So this is a free program, and it's also amazing, so you don't have to worry about spending a single coin. So I'm going to drag in this sample that we just rendered. And why do we need this program? So I'm going to explain on the way. Select Effect, Normalize. Make sure the first two boxes are checked, and put in 0 dB. Hit OK. Now we have an overview of our kick loop. As you can see, they're not even, and there are nasty bulges, as you can see here. This one has a bulge at the bottom. This one has a bulge at the top, as well as this one. So we need to be taming that. So it's pretty easy. We would just like to highlight the bass, go up here to Effect, Amplify. And let's turn this down to a reasonable amount. Maybe 1 dB. Alright, that looks nice. Now I'm going to apply the same method for all the bulges. Okay, and once we're done, we can now export this into our final product. Go up here to File and select Export Audio. I'm going to give it a new name. Make sure you're selecting other uncompressed files as the type. Go to Options, select Microsoft Wave, and select Signed 24-bit. Hit OK, and hit Save. So this is why I'm using Audacity whenever I make samples. It's because you can add in a lot of tags that FL Studio natively cannot do. You can add as much tags as you want. So this section is pretty obvious and you probably know what to do here. So now that I have filled up all the blanks, I can now proceed to exporting this. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to check what I did, just to give you an idea. Once it's all done, finally hit OK. Boom. So that's it for today. I would like to thank you for tuning in today's Sound Design Saturday episode. If you find this video informative and helpful, go hit that like button. Feel free to share this with your friends. Spread the love, baby. I'm also inviting you to check out more of my work and my projects. I have links in the description that you can check out. Did you know I also release free remake projects? I'll be so glad if you check them out. Stay tuned for the next episode. So this has been Raz Loyola. God bless you, and I'll see you guys next time.
Sure.